Good afternoon and good evening. From William, fellow Sierra Leoneans. Let me just introduce myself a moment. My name is Wadiike-Williams, and I'm the chairperson and leader of the National Progressive Democrats. And we are one of the founder members of the consortium of progressive political parties. I'm here today not to talk about myself or my party, but more specifically, I'm here to talk about the consortium of progressive political parties. Who are we? What do we stand for? What are our aims and aspirations? And really, what prompted our formation? Well, let me give a rather brief tour of the history of consortium of progressive political parties. The germ of this idea, the genesis of this idea, was sowed on the day after the last general election, general and presidential election. It was on that day that the machinations that have led us to this precipice of catastrophe was first initiated. What am I speaking about here? Well, at the last election, and I'm sure that most of you noticed, were aware, that the electorate of our nation, the voters of our nation, decided that what they wanted was a government of unity. They felt that only through a government of unity could they be sure that our freedoms as individuals and as a nation would be guaranteed, and that justice indeed would be the glue that held this nation together. And so, this is exactly what this nation did. They voted in a way that handed the executive, i.e. the presidency, to the SLPP. The electorate in Sierra Leone then handed the legislature, that is Parliament, to the APC. And here was the commencement of the committing of the original sin. The SLPP, through unfortunate machinations, was able to acquire the Speaker's seat in Parliament, even though they did not and were not the majority party. And in so doing, they subverted the will of the people of Sierra Leone. In other words, the people of Sierra Leone voted for cohabitation, or cohabitation, as the French say. The people of Sierra Leone voted for cohabitation. They voted effectively for a government of national unity, a government that could only pass legislation and bills if it was in the interest of Sierra Leone, as opposed to the interest of the South or the North or the Mendes or the Temis. Laws would be passed in the interest of Sierra Leone. That was the decision made by this nation in the 2018 elections. And that was the decision that was subverted. And that was precisely the point of this original sin, that it became clear that we had a regime that was anything but democratic, that was anything but glued to the idea of democracy. It was then that perhaps the first seed started to germinate. And this is what happened, in essence. Individual parties in our individual silos developed various forms of protest, wrote to the incoming regime, late further down the line even demonstrated against some of their actions. But it quickly became apparent that this was all to no avail. The powers that be took no notice. They were indifferent to the pleas and anguish of our population. And when eventually moves were made that seemed to indicate that we're heading towards a one-party state, towards the imposition of yet another layer of nightmare for our nation, when it became clear that we're heading that direction, and we saw three particular trigger issues. The midterm census was one such. The cybercrime bill was another such. But perhaps most terrifying of all was the attempt to remove political parties from the political activities at local level. In other words, at the most intimate level at which the state interacts with the public, in which fundamental decisions are made. The denationalization or decentralization bill has at its core the notion that all will be well insofar as political parties were removed from the political process at local level. The problems with this are immediately obvious. At a local election, if 50 people decide they want to stand, there would have to be some mechanism for filtering through. And of course, the government or the regime of the day would of course put up structures that will filter through people. And you can rest assured that the end result would be only people that met with the approval of the ruling party or the ruling regime will see light of day as a candidate. Well, clearly this was totally unacceptable. The Constitution is explicit. The statutes are explicit. That we have, as political parties, the constitutional right, the constitutional mandate to actually practice politics, stand for elections at local, national, and presidential levels. And the attempt, therefore, to remove political parties from this particular level of governance was clearly an attempt by the powers that be to push this process towards a one-party state. Clearly, we could not blindly sleepwalk into yet another one-party nightmare. This was the trigger that brought 13 progressive parties together under the umbrella of Coppp to begin to marshal our resources to oppose this government's in almost insane pursuit of what can only be termed a return to one-party status. Every member of Coppp was resolved to join this fight for democracy. It was this deep patriotism, this need to for once challenge this headlong flight towards an authoritarian, autocratic regime that prompted us to indeed form Coppp. It's not necessary for me to reiterate all the nightmares, the pain, the anguish that our nation is suffering. I don't have to remind this global audience of the hecatomb of corpses that was left decimated in Padma Road, in the heart of our capital. I don't need to take you through the horrific experiences of some youth in Makeni and Tombo and various areas where the state's response has been anything but considerate. In fact, it has been out and out bloody and destructive. It gives me no pleasure to say that Sierra Leone today is under extraordinary pressure and is potentially volatile. And it is a recognition of that volatility that has inspired the 13 parties to begin to fashion the voice of this nation. Coppp does not subscribe to tribalism, to regionalism, or any other bigoted isms. Coppp is committed absolutely and definitively to democracy. Democracy is the tool, the democratic praxis is the tool that will ensure both our freedom and our unity. However, we recognize that neither our freedom nor our unity is possible without justice. And that is why Coppp will say unapologetically, we will stand for, struggle for, fight for, and if necessary, die for the right for this nation to stand on these three pillars: unity, freedom, and justice. Thank you for your time.